Liberia's corruption trial halted. What does the Supreme Court's ruling mean for justice? Welcome to the Bold African Voice, BAV, your trusted source for in-depth analysis of Africa's most pressing issues. I'm Abdul Karim Kargbo, born and raised in Africa. In today's video, we take a closer look at the recent decision by Liberia's Supreme Court to halt a major corruption trial. What does this mean for the country's judicial independence, and how does it compare to anti-corruption efforts across the continent? Stay tuned as we break down the complexities and look ahead to what this ruling means for Liberia's future. On March 6, 2025, the Supreme Court of Liberia issued a temporary suspension of proceedings in a high-profile corruption trial involving former senior government officials. The case has been a significant point of discussion in Liberia, as it deals with serious charges including economic sabotage, fraud, theft, illegal disbursement of public funds, and money laundering. However, the Supreme Court's decision to halt the trial has raised crucial legal questions that demand further scrutiny. This video explores the implications of this ruling, its potential effects on Liberia's fight against corruption, and draws a comparison with similar cases across the African continent. Legal landscape and the halted trial. The Supreme Court's decision, issued by Justice in Chambers Sane D. Clinton Johnson, mandates a halt in the ongoing corruption trial of 5 prominent figures, including former Finance Minister Samuel D. Twee, former Acting Minister of Justice Cully R. Nyanati Twan, former Director of the Financial Intelligence Agency Stanley S. Ford, former Comptroller D. Moses P. Cooper, and former National Security Advisor Jefferson Carmo. The petitioners, who include the accused individuals, have raised objections concerning the procedural management of the case by Judge Roosevelt Zeed Willie of the First Judicial Circuit, Criminal Assizes C for Montserrado County. Their concerns center on alleged mismanagement of the trial, which they argue may compromise the fairness and integrity of the proceedings. The petitioners have requested the intervention of the Supreme Court through the filing of a writ of prohibition, which is a legal tool used to prevent lower courts from overstepping their jurisdiction or conducting improper actions. The writ, if granted, will halt the trial until the court conducts a thorough review. This decision marks a critical moment in Liberia's broader fight against corruption, as the country continues to grapple with high levels of corruption in both public and private sectors. With allegations ranging from fraudulent dealings to the illegal use of public funds, this case touches on some of the most damaging issues in Liberia's governance. The broader impact on Liberia's anti-corruption efforts. The suspension of the trial has significant implications for Liberia's anti-corruption efforts. Corruption remains one of the most persistent issues facing the country, with the World Bank and Transparency International repeatedly highlighting its impact on Liberia's development. The lack of accountability for corrupt officials is a major reason why Liberia remains trapped in cycles of poverty, underdevelopment, and political instability. For the trial to be suspended due to procedural issues raises questions about the efficiency and effectiveness of Liberia's judicial system. The public perception of corruption trials in Liberia is often one of skepticism, with many citizens doubting whether justice will ever be served. The current suspension could either reinforce this skepticism or present an opportunity to improve the legal framework to ensure that corruption cases are managed transparently and fairly. Furthermore, the motion filed by Jefferson Carmo for a separate trial is a complex development in this case. Carmo's legal team argues that his involvement in the alleged crimes is distinct from the other defendants, which, they claim, could affect his right to a fair trial if he were tried alongside them. This motion adds another layer of complexity to a case that is already under intense public scrutiny. Comparative analysis of corruption trials. Across Africa, Liberia's corruption case is not an isolated incident. Throughout Africa, countries are facing similar challenges when it comes to holding corrupt officials accountable. Many African governments have implemented anti-corruption measures, but success has often been mixed, with some countries making significant strides while others have failed to create meaningful change. Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, has made headlines in recent years with high-profile anti-corruption campaigns under President Muhammadu Buhari. His administration has touted the prosecution of former government officials accused of embezzlement and fraud. However, the outcomes of these trials have often been inconsistent. High-profile cases such as the trial of former oil minister Diazani Alison Madueke for alleged money laundering have been drawn out over many years, with legal challenges and delays stalling proceedings. These delays, similar to Liberia's, have cast doubts on the effectiveness of Nigeria's anti-corruption efforts. South Africa. South Africa has also faced significant challenges in prosecuting corruption, particularly following the tenure of former President Jacob Zuma, whose presidency was marred by numerous allegations of state capture and corruption. Zuma's trial for corruption, which has lasted for years, has seen numerous delays and legal challenges, similar to what is happening in Liberia. South African courts have faced pressure from both political and public spheres, questioning the independence and efficiency of the judiciary when dealing with such high-stakes cases. Kenya presents another example of a country grappling with corruption trials. The Kenyan government, under President Uhuru Kenyatta, has pushed for more transparency and accountability, especially in the wake of the 2010 Constitution, which introduced the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, EACC. However, corruption cases, such as those involving the National Youth Service (NYS) scandal, have been delayed or marred by legal challenges and political interference. The inefficiency of the judicial system in processing corruption cases in Kenya is a topic that many experts believe needs urgent reform. Liberia's position, challenges, and opportunities. The legal challenges currently playing out in Liberia present both risks and opportunities. While delays in corruption trials risk undermining public confidence in the judicial system, they also open the door for a potential overhaul of Liberia's legal processes. The country's ability to tackle corruption in an effective and transparent manner will depend largely on how the Supreme Court handles this case and how it deals with similar cases in the future. Moving forward, Liberia may need to consider a comprehensive review of its judicial processes, particularly regarding the handling of corruption cases. Ensuring that the court system is free from political influence and equipped to handle such high-profile trials efficiently could be a significant step toward restoring public trust. The forward-looking approach. In terms of a forward-looking approach, Liberia must address both the procedural and structural challenges within its judicial system. It is essential for the government to ensure that trials of this magnitude are not bogged down by legal technicalities, but proceed in a fair and timely manner. Furthermore, Liberia should consider strengthening institutions such as the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, LACC, and promoting greater cooperation with international bodies to ensure that justice is not only done, but seen to be done. The upcoming review of the writ of prohibition on March 10, 2025, will likely be a defining moment for the future of corruption trials in Liberia. Should the Supreme Court uphold the writ and suspend the trial, it will be crucial for the judiciary to act swiftly to resolve the issues at hand. If the trial proceeds, the government must ensure that it is managed in a way that meets the expectations of the Liberian people and sets a strong precedent for future cases. A crossroads for Liberia's judicial integrity. As the Liberian Supreme Court prepares for its review of the writ of prohibition, the future of the country's anti-corruption efforts hangs in the balance. The outcome of this case, along with the legal challenges being raised, will be critical in shaping public opinion and the country's ability to tackle corruption head-on. What happens in Liberia will also be closely watched by other African nations facing similar challenges in their own judicial and anti-corruption systems. Whether Liberia succeeds or falters in this case, it will undoubtedly influence the continent's broader fight against corruption and its efforts to build more transparent and accountable governance. The role of international support and the global fight against corruption. One significant aspect of Liberia's ongoing legal battle is the role that international institutions and foreign governments play in supporting the country's anti-corruption initiatives. Liberia, like many other African nations, has received substantial backing from international bodies such as the United Nations, the World Bank, and the African Union in its efforts to combat corruption. These organizations often provide technical assistance, resources, and oversight to ensure that anti-corruption laws are properly enforced. However, international support alone is not enough. For Liberia to make meaningful progress, it must demonstrate its commitment to creating a transparent, independent, and effective legal system. The delays and legal challenges seen in the current corruption case underscore the importance of judicial reform within the country. Liberia must ensure that its courts are capable of handling high-profile cases with the level of efficiency and fairness that the international community expects. Moreover, the involvement of foreign legal experts and anti-corruption watchdogs may provide crucial insights into how Liberia can improve its legal framework. By strengthening its legal institutions and collaborating with international partners, Liberia can enhance its credibility and reputation in the global fight against corruption. A call for comprehensive judicial reform in Liberia. The ongoing case also shines a light on the need for comprehensive judicial reform in Liberia. Delays caused by legal challenges and procedural errors suggest systemic issues within the country's legal infrastructure. It is clear that the current judicial system is struggling to keep up with the demands of complex corruption cases, which require a well-resourced and independent judiciary. In the long term, Liberia must address these challenges by investing in its judicial capacity. This could include training judges and lawyers on handling complex financial crimes, establishing specialized courts for corruption cases, and ensuring that judicial independence is maintained. Furthermore, the establishment of an independent body to oversee the conduct of judges and ensure accountability will go a long way in restoring public trust in the legal system. A more transparent and accountable judiciary would not only enhance the prosecution of corruption cases, but would also send a clear message that Liberia is serious about addressing corruption at all levels. This could help break the cycle of impunity that has plagued the country for decades. Regional collaboration in tackling corruption. While Liberia's legal system faces significant hurdles, the broader West African region has made some notable strides in improving governance and tackling corruption. Several countries in the region have introduced institutional frameworks and reforms aimed at strengthening their anti-corruption efforts. Ghana, for example, has made significant progress in curbing corruption through institutions like the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, CHRAJ, and the Office of the Special Prosecutor, OSP. These institutions have shown some success in prosecuting corruption cases and investigating government officials. Ghana's approach, which includes proactive measures such as asset declarations and whistleblower protections, offers valuable lessons for Liberia. In particular, Ghana's focus on institutional strengthening and public accountability could provide a model for Liberia as it seeks to improve its own anti-corruption framework. Sierra Leone, Liberia's neighbor to the northwest, has also faced similar challenges in prosecuting corruption. The country's Anti-Corruption Commission, ACC, has been active in investigating and prosecuting cases of corruption, including high-profile cases against politicians and business leaders. While Sierra Leone has made strides in its anti-corruption fight, challenges such as political interference and public skepticism remain. However, the establishment of an independent anti-corruption commission and the passing of strong anti-corruption legislation have set the foundation for sustained progress. The role of ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, of which Liberia is a member, also plays a role in supporting anti-corruption initiatives across the region. ECOWAS has recognized the importance of tackling corruption for regional stability and development. Through initiatives such as the ECOWAS Anti-Corruption Strategy, member states, including Liberia, are encouraged to implement anti-corruption measures in alignment with regional standards. ECOWAS efforts to promote good governance and encourage judicial reform can provide Liberia with the support needed to strengthen its own institutions. The broader implications for African governance. The ongoing legal battles in Liberia have wider implications for governance across the African continent. Corruption remains one of the major obstacles to Africa's development, and the inability of many African countries to hold corrupt officials accountable undermines public trust in both governments and institutions. For Africa to move forward economically and politically, it must tackle corruption head-on. While many African countries have made progress in improving governance, the continent still faces significant challenges. The persistence of corruption is a reminder that institutional reform must be accompanied by political will and public support. African leaders must demonstrate a genuine commitment to eradicating corruption, not only through legal frameworks, but also through transparency, accountability, and the promotion of ethical leadership. The outcomes of Liberia's corruption trial will likely influence not only the country's future, but also the broader regional and continental efforts to combat corruption. If Liberia can demonstrate that it can effectively address corruption cases, it will serve as an example for other nations struggling with similar issues. Conversely, delays and procedural challenges may continue to undermine confidence in the country's ability to tackle corruption. An opportunity for renewal. As Liberia's Supreme Court reviews the writ of prohibition and considers the motion for a separate trial, the country finds itself at a crossroads. The outcomes of this case have the potential to shape Liberia's future in its fight against corruption. Should the legal process be allowed to continue without further delay, Liberia will have an opportunity to set a strong precedent for justice. If the case is delayed again or dismissed on procedural grounds, it could send a message that corruption remains an insurmountable challenge, undermining efforts to reform the country's political and economic systems. What happens in Liberia in the coming weeks could have far-reaching implications for the broader African continent. For Africa to build a future that is free of corruption and political instability, the continent must adopt a multifaceted approach to reform, incorporating strong legal frameworks, political will, and international cooperation. Liberia's Supreme Court decision on March 10th will be an important moment, not only for the country, but for all of Africa. It is a moment that could either reinforce the hope that Africa's fight against corruption is gaining ground or reinforce the cynicism that continues the political dimension of Liberia's legal challenges. Beyond the legal and judicial implications, the ongoing corruption case in Liberia also has significant political ramifications. In a country where political patronage and clientelism have historically been entrenched, corruption trials often take on a political dimension. The individuals involved in this case are not only former high-ranking government officials, but also political figures with strong networks of influence within Liberia's political ecosystem. The delayed trial could create an atmosphere of uncertainty, particularly for President George Weah's administration. While the Weah administration has pledged to fight corruption, critics have frequently pointed to alleged instances of corruption and mismanagement within his government. These ongoing trials could potentially serve as a litmus test for the credibility of his administration's anti-corruption stance. If the case is drawn out and accusations of procedural errors persist, it may appear as though the current government lacks the capacity or the political will to tackle high-level corruption. On the other hand, the suspension of the trial could serve as a political tool for some factions within Liberia's political sphere. Opponents of the Weah government might argue that the delay is indicative of political interference, or that powerful interests are working behind the scenes to protect the accused individuals. This scenario, in turn, could fuel further political divisions and undermine the general public's confidence in Liberia's ability to deliver justice equitably. The role of civil society and the media civil society organizations, CSOs, and the media have long played a critical role in Liberia's fight against corruption. The suspension of the corruption trial presents an opportunity for these groups to continue pushing for transparency and accountability in Liberia's legal processes. They can also advocate for the importance of timely trials and fair proceedings, which are essential to building public trust in Liberia's legal and political institutions. The media holds substantial power in shaping the narrative around the case. If the media highlights the legal challenges, procedural errors, and potential political motivations behind the suspension, It could amplify the public outcry and pressure the judiciary to expedite the legal process. On the other hand, if the media chooses to downplay or sensationalize the issue, it could further muddy the waters, creating confusion among the Liberian populace about the trial's significance. In Liberia, where public trust in institutions is often fragile, the role of the media cannot be overstated. A free and independent press can act as a watchdog, ensuring that the judicial system remains fair and transparent, and that powerful individuals are not able to manipulate the system to avoid accountability. The economic ramifications of corruption trials. Corruption in Liberia has far-reaching economic consequences. When public funds are misappropriated or stolen, the damage is not just to the individuals involved, but also to the entire country's economy. Corruption often leads to inefficient use of resources, stunted economic development, and diminished foreign investment. In Liberia's case, the high-profile corruption charges against top government officials have implications for the country's development prospects, especially in light of its fragile post-war economy. The legal and political uncertainty surrounding the trial could impact Liberia's economic standing, both domestically and internationally. International investors, donors, and development partners often assess the stability and reliability of a country's governance before committing financial resources. If Liberia's government is perceived as weak in its ability to deal with corruption at the highest levels, it could lead to reduced investments and aid, further exacerbating the country's economic struggles. Moreover, the public's confidence in Liberia's economic future is closely tied to how effectively the government handles corruption cases. If the trial is delayed or dismissed without a meaningful resolution, it could lead to diminished public confidence in the government's ability to foster sustainable development. This, in turn, could result in reduced domestic investment, as businesses and entrepreneurs might hesitate to commit to an environment that is seen as riddled with corruption and inefficiency. The social impacts. Public perception of justice. Public perception of justice in Liberia is shaped by how well the judicial system is perceived to address corruption and ensure accountability. In the context of a suspended corruption trial, Liberians may feel frustrated and disillusioned if the case drags on without clear resolution. This frustration could manifest in protests, public outcry, and a general sense of disillusionment with the legal system. For ordinary citizens, the failure to hold corrupt officials accountable can breed resentment toward the political class and the institutions that are supposed to safeguard justice. As the trial of these high-profile figures continues to be delayed, the Liberian public will likely scrutinize the actions of the government, the judiciary, and the accused officials. If they perceive the system as favoring the powerful and impeding justice, it could lead to increased dissatisfaction with the ruling government and its institutions. However, the legal challenges and subsequent review also present an opportunity for Liberia's judicial system to show its independence and integrity. If the Supreme Court ultimately resolves the case fairly, expeditiously, and transparently, it could enhance the credibility of the judiciary and strengthen public trust in the country's ability to deliver justice. The public would be more likely to support efforts to combat corruption if they see that the legal system is functioning effectively and impartially. Liberia's path forward. Key recommendations. As Liberia navigates the complexities of this corruption trial, several key actions could help improve the country's chances of succeeding in its broader fight against corruption. 1. Judicial reform. The delays in this corruption case highlight the need for reform within Liberia's judicial system. There is an urgent need to streamline processes, enhance judicial training, and ensure that courts are adequately equipped to handle complex corruption cases. Liberia should work toward creating a specialized court system for corruption cases, which could expedite trials and ensure greater expertise in managing such high-stakes cases. 2. Strengthening anti-corruption institutions. Liberia must continue to support and empower institutions like the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, LACC, to independently investigate and prosecute corruption. These institutions should be shielded from political influence and given the necessary resources to carry out their work effectively. 3. Engagement with civil society. A robust and engaged civil society is essential for ensuring that Liberia's fight against corruption remains focused and accountable. The government should work closely with civil society organizations to monitor the trial and ensure that transparency and fairness are upheld throughout the process. 4. Public awareness campaigns. The government, in collaboration with the media and civil society, should run public awareness campaigns to keep the public informed about the progress of the trial and the broader efforts to combat corruption. Educating citizens about their rights and the legal process can help build public confidence in the system and empower citizens to hold their government accountable. 5. International cooperation. Liberia should continue to work closely with international organizations and partners to combat corruption. International expertise, support, and oversight can help Liberia strengthen its anti-corruption efforts and ensure that justice is served fairly and transparently. Awaiting the Supreme Court's ruling. As Liberia awaits the Supreme Court's ruling on the writ of prohibition, the future of the country's anti-corruption efforts is hanging in the balance. Whether this trial will serve as a milestone in the fight against corruption or an illustration of the weaknesses in Liberia's judicial system remains to be seen. However, one thing is clear. The case represents a pivotal moment for Liberia and the wider African continent. How Liberia navigates this trial could shape the direction of its future governance and its efforts to build a transparent, accountable political system. The case will continue to unfold in the coming weeks, with the March 10 review acting as the next significant step in determining the outcome. As Liberia moves forward, it must recognize that the fight against corruption is long-term, requiring consistent reform, a commitment to justice, and political will to ensure that those who undermine the country's development are held accountable. The outcomes of this trial, along with the broader societal and institutional changes it may spark, will shape Liberia's path towards sustainable development and improved governance in the years to come. A turning point for Liberia's governance. The ongoing legal challenges faced by Liberia in this corruption trial are not just about one case, but rather a turning point for the broader governance of the country. As the case involving former senior government officials continues to be delayed, it offers a critical opportunity for Liberia to address deep-rooted issues in its governance structure. These issues include not just corruption, but also the capacity of public institutions to carry out their duties effectively and impartially. The Supreme Court's decision to review the writ of prohibition on March 10, 2025, could very well set the tone for Liberia's future trajectory in its battle against corruption. The legal processes and outcomes could send a message not only to Liberians, but to the international community regarding the country's commitment to justice and the rule of law. With the eyes of both domestic and foreign stakeholders fixed on Liberia, the next few months will be critical. For President George Weah's administration, which has emphasized its anti-corruption stance, this case represents a defining moment. The outcome of the trial, whether it continues, gets delayed again, or faces political challenges, will speak volumes about the government's ability to address corruption at the highest levels. For Liberia's citizens, whose lives are directly impacted by systemic corruption, the verdict of this trial is seen as symbolic of whether they can truly trust the legal and political systems to work in their favor. The need for broader political will. One of the critical challenges facing Liberia in its fight against corruption is political will. As this trial continues, it's clear that addressing corruption is not just about the judicial system. It is also about ensuring that the political leadership does not allow powerful elites to undermine reforms for personal or political gain. Liberia's political environment has historically been marked by factionalism and patronage systems, where political loyalty often trumps professional competence or integrity. This trial, and the legal battle surrounding it, underscores the need for a broader commitment to rooting out corruption at every level of government. Liberia's leaders must demonstrate that they are willing to take concrete steps to ensure that public service is about accountability, not personal enrichment. While this case is one of the most high-profile examples, there are numerous other cases of corruption that continue to go unchecked or are delayed indefinitely within the judicial system. Moving forward, Liberia will need more than just judicial reform. It will require leaders who prioritize the fight against corruption, who lead by example, and who take actionable steps to create a political environment in which corruption cannot thrive. The country's current administration has pledged to fight corruption, but this trial will be an important test of whether they are willing to take on not just lower-level corruption, but the most powerful figures in the political landscape. The role of the international community in supporting Liberia's anti-corruption agenda. Liberia's efforts to combat corruption could benefit from sustained international support. The international community, including the United Nations, the World Bank, and bilateral partners, has been instrumental in providing technical assistance, financial support, and diplomatic pressure for Liberia's anti-corruption efforts. However, the international community's support must go beyond financial aid. It must also include practical, on-the-ground support in strengthening Liberia's institutions and promoting good governance. One of the most important aspects of international support is the promotion of transparency and the fight against impunity. International organizations have the ability to shine a spotlight on cases like this one, ensuring that they do not disappear from public view or get mired in delays. International actors also provide valuable assistance in terms of best practices, legal frameworks, and capacity building for the Liberian government. As Liberia seeks to reform its judicial system, the international community can help by providing expertise and supporting the establishment of institutions that will hold corrupt officials accountable regardless of their status or political power. However, the international community's support must also come with a commitment to ensuring that aid and investment are directed towards sustainable development and governance reforms. By tying foreign aid to measurable outcomes in governance and anti-corruption efforts, international partners can help incentivize Liberia to stay on track in its reform process. The potential for future accountability. Despite the setbacks and challenges that this trial has faced so far, there is potential for greater accountability in Liberia. The current trial, and others like it, could act as a catalyst for broader societal changes, particularly as the public becomes more engaged in the anti-corruption movement. The role of the media, civil society, and everyday Liberians is crucial in ensuring that these trials remain in the public eye and that the pressure on the judicial system continues to mount. If Liberia's court system can demonstrate that it is capable of handling complex corruption cases with efficiency and transparency, it could become a beacon for other African countries struggling with similar issues. The challenge, of course, lies in maintaining momentum. Corruption trials can take years to conclude, but it is important that Liberia does not allow the process to stall indefinitely. Continued public engagement and activism are needed to keep pressure on the government and the courts to ensure that corruption does not go unpunished. Lessons from Africa's anti-corruption struggles. Liberia's experience with corruption trials is part of a larger continent-wide struggle against corruption that continues to unfold across Africa. The challenges faced by Liberia's legal system are not unique. Many African countries have faced similar issues with long delays, legal challenges, and political interference in corruption cases. Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, for example, the fight against corruption has been complicated by political maneuvering and legal challenges. Under the leadership of former President Robert Mugabe and later under President Emerson Mnangagwa, efforts to prosecute corruption were frequently delayed, and those accused were often protected by their political connections. Even after the ousting of Mugabe, high-profile cases, such as that of former Minister of Finance Tendai Biti, have faced significant legal hurdles. Zimbabwe's judiciary continues to face challenges regarding its independence and efficiency in handling corruption cases. Uganda has seen similar obstacles in its anti-corruption efforts. Despite the establishment of the Anti-Corruption Court and the Anti-Corruption Coalition Uganda, ACCU, high-profile cases are often delayed, and political connections continue to shield the most influential individuals from prosecution. In many cases, allegations of corruption are dropped due to the inability of the judiciary to reach timely verdicts or political pressure to resolve matters behind closed doors. Malawi has seen significant legal victories in its fight against corruption, particularly following the notorious Cashgate scandal in 2013, in which millions of dollars were embezzled from government accounts. However, the country has faced considerable challenges in prosecuting high-profile individuals involved in corruption, and many cases have been delayed due to judicial inefficiency and political interference. Despite the government's efforts, there remains a significant gap in holding the most powerful figures accountable. Liberia's path to rebuilding trust. The trajectory of Liberia's legal system and its handling of corruption trials will be a key indicator of the country's ability to rebuild trust in its institutions and move towards sustainable development. The current legal challenges, though frustrating, represent an opportunity for the nation to reevaluate its judicial processes and make necessary reforms to ensure that corruption is prosecuted fairly and efficiently. Liberia's struggle is not unique to the country. It reflects broader continental issues of judicial independence, political interference, and the challenges of holding powerful individuals accountable. If Liberia can resolve this corruption case in a fair and transparent manner, it will send a strong message to both domestic and international actors about the country's commitment to justice. The coming weeks, with the Supreme Court's review and possible rulings, will determine whether Liberia can turn this moment into a decisive step forward in its ongoing fight against corruption. The world will be watching, and the implications of the trial's outcome will resonate far beyond Liberia's borders. The role of accountability in Liberia's democracy. The ongoing corruption trial and its legal challenges also highlight the importance of accountability in Liberia's young democracy. Liberia has a history marked by civil conflict, and the establishment of a stable democratic system is still in its formative stages. As the nation works to rebuild itself after years of war and instability, the role of accountability in the political and judicial systems cannot be overstated. Corruption has undermined efforts to strengthen Liberia's democracy, and many citizens view the prosecution of corrupt officials as essential to restoring faith in the political system. However, Liberia's ability to deliver justice is under scrutiny, and the manner in which this trial unfolds will either reinforce or erode public confidence in Liberia's democratic institutions. In Liberia, the connection between corruption and democratic instability is well understood. When leaders and institutions are seen as corrupt or inefficient, the legitimacy of the government is called into question. Citizens frustrated with government corruption may be less likely to engage in the democratic process, either by voting or participating in civic life. Therefore, the integrity of corruption trials, particularly one involving high-profile individuals, is essential to solidifying the foundations of democracy in Liberia. If Liberia can demonstrate that its democratic institutions are capable of holding those in power accountable, it will have taken an important step toward ensuring the long-term stability and development of its political system. Political divisions and corruption cases. As with many corruption cases in Africa, political divisions within Liberia play a significant role in how the case is perceived by the public. Supporters of the accused individuals are likely to argue that the legal process is politically motivated, especially in a context where political factions often rely on patronage and loyalty networks. On the other hand, those who seek justice will argue that the accused must face the full consequences of their actions, regardless of political affiliations. Political party dynamics, particularly those between the ruling party and opposition groups, further complicate the public's understanding of the case. While the current administration, under President George Weah, has pledged to combat corruption, opposition groups may view the trial as an opportunity to undermine the government's legitimacy. This dynamic plays out in the media, with various outlets providing differing interpretations of the legal proceedings, often aligned with their political inclinations. The influence of political parties in Liberia's legal landscape raises important questions about judicial independence. If the judiciary is perceived as susceptible to political pressure, it undermines the public's trust in its ability to deliver impartial justice. Conversely, if the judiciary maintains its independence and delivers a transparent, fair verdict, it could send a powerful message that corruption will not be tolerated, regardless of political affiliation. Public expectations and disillusionment. Liberia's citizens, many of whom have experienced the ravages of civil war and economic hardship, have high expectations for the legal and political systems to deliver justice. Public sentiment is a crucial factor in shaping the national response to corruption trials. If citizens perceive that the legal process is slow or flawed, or that powerful individuals are evading justice, public frustration will continue to grow. The trial is more than just a legal matter. It is a social and political event that has the potential to shape Liberia's public consciousness. If the trial is delayed indefinitely or fails to result in meaningful consequences for the accused, public disillusionment may spread, and faith in the government and the legal system could diminish. On the other hand, if the trial proceeds without further delays and delivers a just verdict, it may help restore confidence in the country's institutions and encourage greater civic engagement. However, the general sense of cynicism toward corruption trials, especially when they are prolonged, is a challenge Liberia must confront. The delay in this particular case, alongside the ongoing debate about the procedural handling of the trial, risks fostering a perception that the legal system is ineffective or unwilling to hold powerful figures accountable. The potential for such disillusionment highlights the importance of ensuring that the trial is conducted fairly, efficiently, and transparently, allowing Liberia's citizens to feel that justice is being served. The global context. African leadership in the fight against corruption. Liberia is not alone in its efforts to tackle corruption. Across the African continent, many nations are grappling with similar challenges as they work to build institutions capable of holding corrupt officials accountable. However, despite some progress, corruption continues to undermine democratic systems and economic development throughout Africa. The outcome of Liberia's corruption trial will be watched closely, not only by its citizens, but by other African nations facing similar struggles. In recent years, several African countries have made strides toward addressing corruption. For instance, Rwanda is often cited as a success story due to its aggressive anti-corruption measures, including the establishment of the Rwanda Governance Board, which works to promote transparency and integrity in government. However, even in Rwanda, critics argue that the focus on corruption has been selective, often targeting low-level officials while overlooking more powerful figures. This highlights the complexities and potential pitfalls of anti-corruption campaigns across Africa. In Nigeria, despite a high-profile anti-corruption campaign led by President Muhammadu Buhari, there has been significant criticism regarding the lack of conviction in high-profile cases. Allegations of selective justice and political influence have dogged the Nigerian government's efforts to tackle corruption. Similarly, South Africa, despite having a robust legal framework to deal with corruption, has witnessed long delays in holding former President Jacob Zuma accountable for his role in state capture, further complicating efforts to ensure justice is done. Despite these challenges, many African countries are moving toward stronger accountability mechanisms, learning from past mistakes, and focusing on creating institutions that can resist political pressure. Liberia, as it continues with its own anti-corruption efforts, is part of a broader continental movement to tackle corruption, but it will need to overcome significant hurdles to demonstrate that its judiciary can fairly and independently deal with these complex cases. The economic repercussions of delayed trials. The legal challenges surrounding the corruption case in Liberia also have wider economic repercussions. Liberia's economy remains fragile, and corruption is one of the key factors preventing the country from reaching its full potential. The diversion of public funds into private pockets, coupled with the lack of effective legal recourse, hinders development, stunts growth, and discourages foreign investment. A prolonged and unresolved corruption trial could deter foreign investors from entering the country or expand existing operations. International organizations, particularly those focused on governance and development, may reassess their support for Liberia if they perceive the judicial system as ineffective in handling corruption cases. This would exacerbate Liberia's economic challenges, making it even more difficult for the government to fund public services and infrastructure, ultimately affecting the livelihood of ordinary Liberians. On the other hand, a timely and just resolution of the trial could have positive economic impacts. It would send a signal to the international community that Liberia is serious about addressing corruption, potentially encouraging greater foreign investment and donor support. This could provide the government with the resources needed to implement critical economic reforms and invest in public infrastructure. Strengthening Liberia's judicial independence. One of the key lessons from the ongoing case is the importance of strengthening judicial independence. In Liberia, as in many African countries, the judiciary is often viewed with suspicion, especially when it comes to high-profile corruption cases. It is vital that Liberia's judicial system remains free from political interference, ensuring that judges are able to make decisions based on the rule of law rather than political considerations. To achieve this, Liberia must implement legal reforms that guarantee judicial independence, provide adequate resources for the courts, and improve the efficiency of the legal system. International organizations, including the United Nations and regional bodies like ECOWAS, can play a role in supporting these reforms. By investing in the capacity and independence of Liberia's judiciary, the country will be better equipped to address corruption and ensure justice for all citizens. The future of corruption trials in Liberia. As Liberia approaches the March 10th review of the writ of prohibition, the future of corruption trials in the country is at a critical juncture. The Supreme Court's decision will likely shape the trajectory of the nation's anti-corruption efforts. If the trial moves forward without further delays, it could serve as a benchmark for future cases. If, however, the trial is delayed again or dismissed due to procedural errors, it could undermine Liberia's efforts to build a transparent and accountable legal system. As Liberia grapples with the challenges of corruption, political will, judicial independence, and institutional reform will be critical. The ongoing trial represents more than just a legal case. It is a test of the country's commitment to justice, good governance, and the rule of law. How Liberia handles this trial will reverberate not only within its borders, but across the African continent, as other nations look to Liberia as a case study in the fight against corruption. The role of public participation and engagement. Public participation remains a cornerstone of any democracy, and Liberia's citizens play a critical role in the ongoing corruption trial. While the legal process is taking place behind closed doors, the opinions and actions of ordinary Liberians have a substantial impact on the direction of the case. Public engagement can ensure that the judiciary is held accountable, putting pressure on both the government and the legal system to follow through with timely and fair justice. The role of civil society organizations, CSOs, advocacy groups, and the media is especially important in ensuring transparency and informing the public. These entities can serve as watchdogs, ensuring that the trial is conducted in line with due process and in the best interests of the people. Civil society has been instrumental in calling for better governance, greater political accountability, and transparency in public office. In the context of this corruption trial, these groups can amplify the voices of ordinary citizens who are seeking justice and ensure that the case is not buried under political pressures. In addition to external watchdogs, Liberian citizens themselves must feel empowered to engage with the process. Educating the public about the legal proceedings, the charges, and the broader implications for the country's governance system is crucial for fostering a well-informed electorate. In a society where corruption has historically been normalized, ensuring that the public understands the significance of these trials can shift the societal perspective and reinforce a culture of accountability. Public engagement can also encourage the judiciary to act swiftly. If the legal system is slow or unresponsive, public outcry can help push for more rapid developments. Civic action, from protests to organized campaigns, has often been a catalyst for change in African countries. A transparent trial, visible to the public and properly covered by the media, can re-establish trust in the judicial process and underscore the importance of accountability. The economic case for a swift justice system. Beyond the political and legal implications, the continued delay in corruption trials has direct economic repercussions for Liberia. The country's economic recovery is still fragile, and corruption remains one of the most significant barriers to sustainable growth. Liberia's GDP is heavily dependent on sectors like mining, agriculture, and services, but the pervasive effects of corruption deter both domestic and foreign investment. Investors, both local and international, tend to shy away from markets where corruption is rife and where legal systems are slow to address such issues. Delayed corruption trials, or the perception that political leaders are immune to prosecution, send a negative message to potential investors. They may fear that their investments could be jeopardized by corrupt practices or that the rule of law will not protect their interests. For Liberia to attract meaningful foreign investment and improve its economic standing, it is crucial that the country demonstrates its commitment to judicial transparency and the rule of law. A quick and fair resolution to this corruption case could signal to the world that Liberia is serious about tackling corruption. This, in turn, could help restore investor confidence, bring new capital into the country, and allow Liberia to better position itself in the global economic landscape. Furthermore, addressing corruption within Liberia's public sector could result in more efficient use of public funds, improved infrastructure, and better access to essential services for the population. A functioning and transparent judiciary will not only promote investment, but will also help ensure that the resources meant for the nation's development are not siphoned off through illegal means. The need for a stronger legal framework. One of the key takeaways from this case is the pressing need for a more robust legal framework in Liberia. While the Supreme Court's decision to review the writ of prohibition is an important step in ensuring fairness, the country's legal system must be equipped to handle such cases efficiently. The delays and legal battles seen in this case have exposed some of the flaws in Liberia's judicial infrastructure. For Liberia to build a strong legal system capable of tackling corruption and providing justice, several reforms are needed. First, the country should invest in training judges and other legal professionals in handling complex corruption cases. Specialized training in financial crimes, anti-money laundering laws, and the intricacies of international financial systems would help Liberia's judiciary navigate the challenges posed by sophisticated corruption schemes. Second, Liberia could benefit from setting up specialized corruption courts that focus solely on corruption-related offenses. These courts would be able to handle such cases with the necessary expertise and efficiency, ensuring that justice is served without undue delay. These courts could also set a precedent for how corruption cases should be handled in the future, establishing a clear legal framework that signals the country's zero-tolerance policy toward corruption. Third, the legal system must ensure greater transparency and accessibility to the public. Making court proceedings and decisions available to the public can help build confidence in the judiciary and ensure that citizens are aware of the progress of cases. Additionally, providing information on the outcomes of corruption cases will demonstrate that justice has been served, even if it takes time. Finally, Liberia must work towards creating an independent body to oversee the integrity of the judiciary, free from political influence. Many African nations struggle with political interference in their legal systems, where judges and prosecutors may be pressured by the political elite. A truly independent judiciary with clear checks and balances is essential for ensuring that the rule of law is upheld in Liberia, learning from international anti-corruption models. Liberia can look to international examples for inspiration as it navigates its own anti-corruption efforts. Countries such as Botswana, Rwanda, and Mauritius have developed effective anti-corruption strategies that could serve as models for Liberia. These countries have created strong institutions, including independent anti-corruption commissions that have gained both national and international recognition for their work. Botswana stands out as an African success story in the fight against corruption. The country has long been praised for its transparency, good governance, and efficient legal system. Botswana's Directorate on Corruption and Economic Crime, DCEC, has been effective in investigating and prosecuting cases of corruption, ensuring that even high-ranking officials are held accountable. By establishing an independent body dedicated solely to investigating corruption, Botswana has created a mechanism that promotes both prevention and enforcement. Similarly, Rwanda has made significant progress in addressing corruption through its governance and justice sector reform program. The country has implemented strict laws aimed at curbing corruption, and its Anti-Corruption Commission works to investigate and prosecute corrupt practices. Rwanda's success in reducing corruption has been attributed to a strong political will, a focus on transparency, and the development of a legal framework that supports anti-corruption efforts. Liberia could learn valuable lessons from these examples by adopting similar institutional frameworks and legal reforms. A comprehensive anti-corruption strategy that includes not only the prosecution of offenders, but also preventive measures such as transparency in government processes and the promotion of civic participation, will be essential for Liberia's long-term success in tackling corruption. Political will and the way forward. At the heart of Liberia's anti-corruption challenge lies the issue of political will. While the government has made public commitments to tackle corruption, actual political action has often lagged. For Liberia to succeed in its fight against corruption, political leaders must demonstrate a clear commitment to confronting this issue, no matter how powerful the accused or how entrenched the system may be. This trial, like many others across the continent, serves as a test of political will. The ruling of the Supreme Court and the subsequent handling of the case will reveal whether Liberia's leaders are willing to take meaningful steps to combat corruption at all levels. A strong signal must be sent that corruption will not be tolerated, and that no one is above the law, regardless of their political connections. In the coming months, Liberia must focus on creating a legal environment where corruption trials are handled expeditiously, without delays or political interference. The government, civil society, and international partners must work together to create a more transparent and accountable system. Ultimately, Liberia's success in combating corruption will depend on a sustained effort to reform the judicial system, strengthen institutions, and build public trust. The outcome of this trial, along with future legal battles, will determine whether Liberia can successfully overcome its corruption challenges and pave the way for a more prosperous and stable future. The impact of Liberia's corruption trials on regional governance. Liberia's ongoing corruption trial and the legal challenges surrounding it have broader implications not only for the country, but also for the wider West African region. In the context of Africa's development, corruption has consistently been one of the most significant barriers to economic and political stability. The ability of nations like Liberia to address high-level corruption cases could set a precedent for other countries struggling with similar issues. West Africa has faced its share of corruption scandals, with many of its nations, including Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, also working to strengthen their anti-corruption frameworks. Liberia's trial is an important test case for the region. The ability of the Liberian judiciary to handle corruption cases efficiently, without delays or political interference, could influence how other countries in the region approach corruption within their own borders. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has a role to play in supporting governance reforms in Liberia and its neighbors. ECOWAS has taken steps to address the challenges posed by corruption, particularly through its West African Governance Protocol, which calls for regional cooperation in tackling corruption and strengthening institutions of governance. Liberia's success or failure in handling its corruption trials could help shape ECOWAS's future efforts in fostering good governance across the region. For instance, if Liberia is able to demonstrate that its judiciary is capable of independently prosecuting powerful individuals, it could provide a blueprint for ECOWAS to encourage other member states to adopt similar measures. Moreover, regional support for Liberia's legal reforms and anti-corruption efforts could bolster Liberia's position and help make its legal system a more credible and effective tool in the fight against corruption. Conversely, if Liberia fails to resolve the case or allows political interference to derail the trial, it could send a negative message to the wider West African region. It would reinforce the belief that, in some African countries, powerful political figures are able to evade justice, further undermining regional efforts to combat corruption. As such, Liberia's trial is much more than a domestic issue. It is an opportunity to strengthen regional norms around accountability and governance. The role of international NGOs and advocacy groups. International non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and advocacy groups have long been involved in efforts to combat corruption in Liberia. These organizations, including Transparency International, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, and the International Justice Mission, IJM, play a crucial role in advocating for judicial reforms and providing technical expertise. Their involvement is particularly important in ensuring that the legal process remains transparent and that Liberia's international commitments to anti-corruption practices are upheld. For instance, Transparency International has frequently highlighted the importance of political will in combating corruption in Africa. The organization has consistently urged the government of Liberia to prioritize anti-corruption measures and improve the effectiveness of its institutions. These organizations often provide invaluable resources to local civil society groups, offering training on monitoring corruption cases as well as advising on the implementation of the best international practices in anti-corruption law. In Liberia's case, the role of these NGOs is crucial in ensuring that the corruption trial remains in the public eye and is not delayed or dismissed due to political interference. Advocacy groups can mobilize citizens, urging them to demand swift justice and transparency. They can also provide independent assessments of the trial's progress, acting as a counterbalance to political pressures that may seek to undermine the legal process. By continuing to engage with international partners and NGOs, Liberia can enhance its anti-corruption efforts and draw on global expertise to help address the systemic issues that persist within its legal and political institutions. Moreover, the involvement of these organizations can help safeguard Liberia's international image, reinforcing the message that the country is committed to good governance and democratic principles. The importance of political reforms alongside judicial reforms. While Liberia's focus on reforming its judicial system is crucial for tackling corruption, the legal system cannot function effectively in isolation from the broader political context. For Liberia's anti-corruption efforts to be successful in the long term, they must be supported by broader political reforms that enhance transparency, limit the influence of political patronage, and create a more open and accountable government. One key area for reform is political party financing. Political campaigns in Liberia, as in many African countries, are often funded by wealthy individuals or interest groups with the expectation of political favors in return. This system of financing perpetuates a cycle of patronage where elected officials feel beholden to their financiers rather than to the electorate. Political reforms that increase transparency in campaign financing and limit the influence of wealthy donors are essential in breaking this cycle and ensuring that politicians act in the best interests of the public. Additionally, Liberia needs to strengthen its institutions of oversight and regulation. Bodies such as the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, LACC, the General Auditing Commission, and the Public Procurement and Concessions Commission must be fully empowered and adequately funded to investigate and prosecute corruption. However, these institutions cannot succeed without the active political will to support their work. Legislative reforms that protect these institutions from political interference and ensure their independence are crucial in strengthening Liberia's anti-corruption framework. Liberia's current anti-corruption efforts, including the ongoing trial of former senior government officials, will be more effective if they are part of a larger strategy of political reform. The judiciary and other oversight bodies must work in tandem with the government to create an environment where transparency is the norm and corruption is no longer tolerated. A political system that fosters accountability will be a key driver in building trust in Liberia's institutions and ensuring that corruption trials, such as the one currently in progress, lead to meaningful change. The impact on Liberia's international relations. As Liberia navigates the challenges posed by this corruption trial, the international community is closely watching the situation. Liberia's relationships with key international partners, such as the United States, the European Union, and multilateral organizations, depend in part on how the government handles corruption and governance issues. If Liberia is seen as effectively addressing corruption and upholding the rule of law, it will strengthen its ties with these international partners, who may offer continued economic support and diplomatic backing. On the other hand, if the trial is delayed or dismissed due to political pressures, Liberia risks damaging its reputation internationally. The country may face reduced foreign aid and investment, particularly from organizations and governments that prioritize governance and transparency. A failure to act decisively on corruption may also undermine Liberia's standing within regional bodies such as ECOWAS, as well as with international human rights and anti-corruption organizations. In this context, Liberia's approach to the trial and its broader anti-corruption strategy will have a direct impact on its international relations. Success in addressing corruption will likely result in more robust international support, while a failure to deliver justice could strain Liberia's diplomatic relations and hinder future economic and political partnerships. A test of Liberia's democratic maturity. Ultimately, the outcome of Liberia's corruption trial is a test of the country's democratic maturity. How Liberia handles this case will send a powerful signal about the strength of its democratic institutions and its commitment to the rule of law. A successful trial, one that is transparent, free from political interference, and results in accountability for corrupt officials, will demonstrate that Liberia can hold its leaders accountable, regardless of their political status. Such a trial would also demonstrate that Liberia has matured as a democracy, one that is not beholden to the power structures of the past, but instead focused on building a fair and just system for all its citizens. For Liberia, this trial represents more than a legal case. It is an opportunity to reaffirm its commitment to good governance and political reform, and to demonstrate to both its citizens and the international community that it is moving toward a more transparent and accountable future. The role of technology in Liberia's fight against corruption. As Liberia grapples with corruption and strives for judicial and political reform, technology can play a pivotal role in enhancing transparency, efficiency, and accountability within both the legal system and the government. Technological innovations have the potential to streamline processes, reduce human errors, and make public services more accessible to citizens. In the context of corruption trials, such as the current one involving former senior officials, technology could also provide a tool for greater oversight and scrutiny, ensuring that these cases are not only handled fairly, but also perceived as being handled impartially. Digital transparency and access to information. One of the most significant ways that technology can help in the fight against corruption is by enhancing transparency and ensuring that information is freely available to the public. Public access to information is critical in maintaining accountability. For instance, Liberia could benefit from the establishment of online platforms that track the progress of corruption trials in real time, allowing citizens to monitor developments and ensure that no one is above the law. Digital platforms could be used to publish trial documents, rulings, and procedural updates, which would increase public confidence in the judicial process. Such platforms could also enable citizens to submit complaints or report suspected corruption anonymously, with mechanisms to protect whistleblowers. This would help to foster a culture of civic engagement, where ordinary people feel empowered to participate in the fight against corruption. For the judiciary, implementing case management software and electronic filing systems could help speed up the process and reduce delays that are often caused by administrative inefficiencies. Furthermore, integrating such systems with other government institutions, such as the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, LACC, and the General Auditing Commission, GAC, could improve coordination and enable more effective investigations into corruption cases. Leveraging data analytics in anti-corruption efforts. Data analytics is another area where technology could enhance Liberia's anti-corruption efforts. By utilizing data to track public spending, identify irregularities, and analyze financial transactions, the government could pinpoint areas where corruption is most likely to occur. These tools could be used by investigative bodies, such as the LACC, to detect patterns of fraud, money laundering, or embezzlement before they become large-scale issues. In a country like Liberia, where transparency in financial transactions has often been limited, the use of advanced data analytics could help uncover hidden assets and wealth linked to corrupt officials. It could also aid in tracking the flow of public funds and ensuring that they are being used for their intended purposes. By increasing the visibility of government spending and public contracts, technology could drastically reduce the opportunities for misappropriation and abuse of power. The ability to use data analytics to monitor the management of resources could also improve Liberia's standing with international donors and investment partners. Donors, particularly those from the United States and the European Union, often require strict accountability mechanisms when providing funds. Demonstrating that Liberia has systems in place to track public funds could increase foreign aid and attract investments that are crucial for the country's development. E-government solutions for public accountability. E-government initiatives are another vital component in strengthening Liberia's fight against corruption. By implementing digital government services that are efficient, transparent, and accessible, Liberia can limit the opportunities for corruption that often arise in face-to-face transactions with government officials. For example, e-governance platforms could be established to handle everything from tax payments and licensing to public procurement and civil service appointments. Online systems would make it easier for citizens to access government services without the need for bribes or personal favors. E-government platforms would also provide a record of all transactions, which would be available for public review and audit, thereby reducing the risk of fraud and increasing the pressure on government officials to act with integrity. In addition, Liberia could create an online public registry of government contracts, including procurement details, contractors, and project statuses. This would make it much harder for corrupt officials to funnel public funds to themselves or their allies without the public's knowledge. Transparency would increase not only trust in the government, but also reduce the cost of doing business, as companies and citizens alike would know that the system is fair and open. Education and awareness, a crucial element in the fight against corruption. While institutional reforms and legal actions are essential in addressing corruption, the role of public education and awareness cannot be overlooked. For Liberia to achieve sustainable change, the population must understand the detrimental effects of corruption and actively participate in the fight against it. Without a broad cultural shift that rejects corruption at every level, the work of the judiciary, the LACC, and other institutions will be limited. Liberia must invest in public awareness campaigns that focus on the impact of corruption on the economy, governance, and society at large. Schools, universities, and community-based organizations could play an essential role in educating the public, particularly the youth, about the dangers of corruption and the importance of integrity. These programs should focus on creating a new generation of leaders who are committed to fighting corruption and fostering a culture of accountability in the public and private sectors. In addition, educational campaigns should emphasize the role of civil society in holding government officials accountable. The media, religious organizations, and community leaders can all play a role in shaping public opinion and building a sense of collective responsibility. By engaging the public in the process of governance, Liberia can encourage the development of a more active and informed citizenry that will hold both elected and appointed officials accountable for their actions. a call for leadership in anti-corruption efforts. The fight against corruption requires leadership at every level. The government, judiciary, civil society, and the private sector must all work together to create a system where transparency, accountability, and the rule of law are the cornerstones of Liberia's governance. This requires not only political will, but also a collective national effort to build institutions that support anti-corruption efforts. Leadership within the government must be consistent and unwavering in its commitment to fighting corruption. While Liberia's current president, George Weah, has made anti-corruption a cornerstone of his administration, much remains to be done. It is crucial that the political leadership acts decisively in strengthening Liberia's legal framework, ensuring the independence of judicial bodies, and supporting the work of anti-corruption institutions. In addition, the government must continue to engage with international bodies to improve governance standards and align Liberia's policies with global anti-corruption initiatives. The private sector, too, plays a role in fostering a culture of integrity. Businesses must be held accountable for their involvement in corrupt practices, whether through bribery, money laundering, or fraud. Developing a strong corporate governance structure and encouraging businesses to adopt ethical practices will help further Liberia's anti-corruption agenda. The business community must also work with the government to ensure that procurement processes are fair and transparent. A shared vision for Liberia's future. Ultimately, the challenge of tackling corruption in Liberia cannot be solved by any single entity or group. It requires a united effort, driven by a shared vision for a better future. Liberia's path forward lies in developing a system where public officials are held accountable for their actions, where the rule of law is upheld, and where corruption is no longer tolerated at any level. The successful prosecution of high-profile cases, such as the one currently underway, will set an important precedent for the future of Liberia. But the fight against corruption is not just about one trial or one case. It is about creating a lasting and sustainable system that supports transparency, accountability, and good governance. Liberia must remain steadfast in its commitment to these principles, with a focus on building institutions that will safeguard the country's future and ensure that corruption no longer holds it back from realizing its full potential. As the case progresses, and as Liberia continues its fight against corruption, it will be important for the government, civil society, the judiciary, and the public to remain engaged and committed to the process. The road ahead will not be easy, but with determination, collaboration, and a clear commitment to justice, Liberia can overcome the barriers posed by corruption and build a brighter future for its citizens. Strengthening international partnerships in the fight against corruption. In Liberia's pursuit of a more transparent and accountable government, international partnerships will continue to play a crucial role. Liberia's anti-corruption efforts should not be confined to its borders. The support of international donors, development organizations, and multilateral institutions like the United Nations, the World Bank, and the African Union can significantly enhance Liberia's progress. These entities can provide both financial and technical resources, helping Liberia build the necessary infrastructure and capacity to fight corruption more effectively. International partnerships can also help Liberia integrate best practices in governance, transparency, and anti-corruption measures from other countries that have made strides in reducing corruption. These countries, particularly those in Africa that have experienced success in tackling corruption, can serve as role models for Liberia, providing guidance on how to create and implement effective anti-corruption strategies. Collaborative international efforts can also increase Liberia's credibility in the global community, strengthening its position in international trade, foreign direct investment, and diplomatic relations. As Liberia moves forward, it should focus on ensuring that its anti-corruption initiatives align with international standards and benefit from the support of its global partners. Liberia's ability to demonstrate success in its fight against corruption will strengthen its international reputation and improve its standing on the global stage. Advice to African leaders: a collective responsibility. Liberia's struggle against corruption, offers critical lessons for other African nations facing similar challenges. As the continent continues its journey toward sustainable development, African leaders must recognize that corruption is one of the most significant barriers to achieving political stability, economic growth, and social progress. Corruption undermines public trust in institutions, stifles innovation, and perpetuates inequality, making it a fundamental issue that must be addressed head-on. African leaders must commit to a comprehensive, multifaceted approach to fighting corruption that includes legal reforms, judicial independence, political accountability, and civic engagement. They must lead by example, demonstrating that no one, regardless of their political or economic power, is above the law. The integrity of leadership is essential for inspiring public confidence and ensuring that institutions tasked with tackling corruption can function effectively. Moreover, African governments must prioritize building strong, independent institutions that can hold corrupt officials accountable. This includes supporting anti-corruption commissions, auditing bodies, and independent courts that are free from political influence. By strengthening institutions and providing them with the necessary resources and protection, leaders can create a framework where corruption is not tolerated and justice is prioritized. It is also essential for African leaders to encourage greater civic participation. A well-informed, engaged citizenry is crucial for holding government officials accountable and for ensuring that political decisions are made transparently and equitably. Governments must actively promote public education about the dangers of corruption and the importance of integrity in public offices. Citizens should feel empowered to report corruption, participate in the democratic process, and hold their leaders accountable. Summary of key messages. 1. Transparency and accountability are essential. Liberia's struggle with corruption underscores the need for transparent and accountable governance. Leaders must act decisively to ensure that corruption is rooted out at all levels of government. 2. The role of judicial reforms. The current corruption trial in Liberia highlights the need for judicial reforms to ensure that the legal system is capable of handling complex corruption cases swiftly and impartially. Strengthening the judiciary is essential for ensuring that justice is done. 3. Political will is crucial. The success of anti-corruption efforts depends on strong political will. Leaders must demonstrate a commitment to fighting corruption by supporting institutional reforms, ensuring judicial independence, and actively engaging with civil society. 4. The importance of public engagement. The active participation of citizens is vital in the fight against corruption. By engaging the public in the process and promoting education and awareness, Liberia and other African nations can build a culture of accountability and integrity. 5. Leveraging technology. Technology can play a transformative role in fighting corruption by increasing transparency, improving the efficiency of government services, and enabling citizens to hold public officials accountable. 6. The need for regional and international cooperation. Liberia's efforts are part of a broader regional and global fight against corruption. By working together with international partners and other African nations, Liberia can build a more robust framework for addressing corruption and promoting good governance. Conclusion. Liberia's ongoing corruption trial is a critical moment not only for the country, but for the wider African continent. The case exemplifies the challenges that many African nations face in tackling corruption, but it also provides an opportunity to reinforce the importance of transparent, accountable governance. For Liberia, the resolution of this trial will set a precedent for the future of its legal system and the effectiveness of its anti-corruption efforts. However, Liberia cannot fight corruption alone. It requires the collective effort of the government, civil society, the judiciary, the private sector, and international partners to create a system that promotes transparency and holds leaders accountable. African leaders must lead with integrity, strengthen institutions, and create an environment where corruption is no longer tolerated. The success of Liberia's anti-corruption efforts and the lessons learned from the ongoing trial will provide a roadmap for other African nations struggling with similar challenges. As African countries move forward, they must recognize that the fight against corruption is not just about punishing wrongdoers, but about creating a culture of transparency and justice that benefits all citizens. The road to a corruption-free Africa is long, but with political will, institutional reform, and public engagement, it is achievable. Thanks for tuning in to the Bold African Voice, BAV. If you found this analysis helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth insights into Africa's political landscape. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Liberia's judicial system can overcome these hurdles? Hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest content. Together, let's keep the conversation going about the future of governance and justice in Africa. See you in the next video.